Hi, everybody. How are we doing? Good. Quick disclaimer before I get started. I'm not very good at talks, not very good at speeches. I'm more of a tell a story kind of guy, and if you can take something from that, that's great. If you don't, it's a bit late in the evening to get your money back from TED, so you might be screwed on that front. Just telling you. Let's start at the very beginning. I am what happens when a fighter pilot has unprotected sex with an air traffic controller. This. In fact, wait, before that, let's go a little further back. Let's get serious. Let's go a little further back. My grandfather, okay, he was on the beaches of Normandy. He tried to get to the beaches of Normandy. He was in the top of the tank. He was a tank commander, so he was kind of sticking out the hole in the top. Shell hit, blew him clear, took his finger off, got some nasty injuries to his knee. Everybody else in the tank died, whether they were crushed, blown up, or drowned there in the salt water. But he came back. He did the obvious with my grandmother and created my father. Now, in this situation, my father became very competitive, and instead of joining the Army, he joined the Canadian RAF, and he became a fast air pilot, went to Miramar, the Top Gun competitions, and all that kind of stuff, won the awards. He then later retired as a brigadier general. So my grandfather, lieutenant colonel, my father, brigadier general, and then, at the age of 16, I pretty much looked at him and said, I know what I want to be when I grow up. And he said, what's that? I said, I want to do ballet. Now, my father, being the incredible human being that he is, he looked at me and said, I don't care what you do, you're my son, I'm going to support you, and he did. And I danced, and I loved it, because I hung out with chicks in spandex, and it was great. Now, the reality is that I injured myself doing an a cappella version of The Devil Went Down to Georgia, and I lost my scholarship. So I went back to Canada. I was in the States at the time, went back to Newfoundland, started pouring pints, had a great time, living like a vampire. My stepfather, who is British himself, who was in Newfoundland at the time, took me to see a stand-up comedian called George Carlin. Do you remember George Carlin? He died recently, but do you remember him? Okay. He did jokes like, why don't you ever see people run and poo at the same time? It was bizarre. Anyway, I saw his stand-up comedy routine, and we both had, myself and my stepfather, had a drink at the bar afterwards, and we were like, he said, like, how did you feel about that? I said, I think with a bit of practice, I could probably be better than him. So he said, put your money where your mouth is. 2 weeks later, I quit my job, got on an airplane, flew to London Heathrow to be a stand-up comedian. Now, there was a fundamental flaw in this plan. That is, I'm not funny. Okay, so by day, I would drive a forklift around his warehouse, and by night, I would go to London and do open mic nights. But unfortunately, I was booed out of most of the venues that I did, including the Comedy Store. I would get drunk because I was nervous. I'd have more drink, and then I'd do really inappropriate comedy, and they'd boo me out. 300 people booed me out. It was amazing. Amazing. Anyway, do you guys know where Stamford is? It's kind of up the A1. Yeah, there you go. Guy from Stamford. Hope you like horses. It's a real big kind of burly horse trials. It's a bit posh. It's not really my scene. I like places that stick to the carpet. Anyway, I'm in a place called the Lord Burleigh. Very posh. And we're drinking wets, and I've got my girlfriend at the time there and my stepsister there, and I've got her other half there too. And I'm talking about this TV show that I'm interested in doing about shooting people with tranquilizer guns and recording it. And they say to me, irrespective of the topic, not only is that illegal, but you're never going to do it. I said, what do you mean? I said, you're not the kind of guy who gets things done. You come up with an idea and then you switch like a week later to a different idea. You don't actually complete anything. I was like, oh, come on, right? And then my girlfriend steps up and says, yeah, actually, they're kind of right on that one. I was like, wow, like big hit to the confidence. It's like, give me an example of when I actually didn't complete what I started. And she says to me, smoking. You said you wanted to quit smoking. You've never even tried. I said, all right. I'm just going to say this now. The next part of this story is extremely blue, so I've had to dumb it down. The truth is that later at the bar, if you see me, you want to hear more details, you buy me a beer and I'll definitely tell you. But the bet that I made to quit smoking for a month was very sexual. And I quit smoking for a month. Now, she says to me, congratulations, now knowing my motivation, she says, I'd be more sexually attracted to you if you were in better shape. So I say, well, obviously. And she says, another bet of a sexual nature, and I decide the best way to do this is if I go to the Army recruiting office, sign up, and then I got to do push-ups and sit-ups and runs and pull-ups and stuff, and then when they say, hey, come on, fella, it's time to go to war, I'll go, no thanks, I'm done, right? A friend of mine in the RAF, he turns around to me and says, actually, you're just perpetuating this cycle, you're kind of quitting again, and that's kind of the whole point of this thing, so why don't you pick the hardest one and be a failure instead? Because people admire failures because you gave it all you got, but you just didn't hit the mark. I said, this is a good idea, right? And so he says, look, what you need to do, pick the hardest one. They're looking for Rottweilers. You're a Labrador Retriever. There's no chance. I said, rockin', who's the hardest one? They said, the Royal Marine Commandos is the longest and hardest basic training in the world. That's your ticket. So next day, I signed up for the Royal Marine Commandos. So that's the end of chapter 1. Are you still with me? Yeah. Rockin'. Let's carry on. Now, somehow, I passed the knowledge test, the intelligence test. The whole family was surprised about that one, okay? I passed the pre-joining fitness test. Now, by this time, my girlfriend, remember the one who didn't believe I can do anything? She says, dude, you quit eating takeaways, you quit drinking, you quit smoking. All you do is go to work, come home, go to the gym, come home, and watch G.I. Jane to get buffed up for war. So like, yeah, that's pretty much it. She was like, I don't really know who you are anymore. I said, love, there's the door. Done. You're in the way of training. So on Valentine's Day, I dumped her. I know. Don't be hating, all right? Bigger things in the plan here, all right? So on I go. I go to an acquaint day. Now, this is an interesting day because this is the first time in my life I've actually heard somebody yell at me, you can vomit and run at the same time. Then they load me on to the potential Royal Marines course, which is the 3 days of hell where you're like, they thrash you to within an inch of your life, and they find out if you're strong enough to start basic training. Incidentally, somewhere around this time, I met a woman at a bar because I thought I was Jason Bourne. I thought she was hot, and I married her, and I now have a 3-year-old, and she's awesome. FYI. So on into basic training I go. Now, this is an interesting part of my life because they start you off with how to put on your clothes, how to take off your clothes, how to polish boots, tie boots, how to make a bed, how to iron sheets, how to make a backpack, with what they give you, how to brush your teeth, how to wash your penis. You know, in their eyes, if they show you how to do something, if you do it wrong, then you're in trouble. And that last one, I stood there. It was very awkward. 55 of us standing around watching my drill sergeant washing himself. It was a bizarre situation. I took it with me. I mean, it's here. Anyway, so from there, they start teaching you how to march and how to climb ropes and how to carry logs over long distances and how to swim with like 25 pounds on your back and how to jump out of things, how to climb up on things, how to get yourself out of the water, all that kind of stuff. And then they put a rifle in your hand, and it's called an SA-80A2, and they teach you how to fix the sights and how to zero it and then how to load and unload and make safe and how to take it apart and put it back together, how to clean it, how to love it, right? How to take care of the magazines, how to fire it accurately. Then they give you a GPMG, which is a 7.62 belt-fed machine gun, which hasn't changed since the Second World War for a reason. It is incredibly efficient at destroying human life, and it is a beautiful piece of machinery, right? They teach you how to take it apart and put it back together. They teach you how to hold onto a grenade, pull the pin out, tell everybody that you've got a grenade, and then lob that thing accurately. Then they start teaching you things like how to crawl around in grass and how to stay hidden, how to identify things that nobody else can identify, how to put grass in your helmet, and then once you get out of the grass, you get in the tree, then you put your branches in the helmet so that you're a different texture, so you're not seen. How to put makeup on, and I don't mean like Thursday night, let's head down to the obvious. I mean like cam cream. Then they start teaching you how to track and destroy your enemy. And then commando training starts, and that's epic. Anyway, long story short, 32 weeks later, somehow I come to the top of the class without injury. Not the top of the class, but in the top bracket. I had a diamond on my chest. 55 people started, 13 originals made it to the end. Just to give you an idea. At one point in time, they literally strapped us to a chair in a room, dunked the room underwater, flipped it upside down, turned off the lights, turned on strobe lights, and then told you to escape from it. And the reason is not because they're douchebags, but because if the helicopter crashes, you need to be able to get out and go and continue the fight. Anyway, they say to me, where do you want to go? I say, who goes to Afghanistan first? They said, those guys. I said, send me there. So off I go to 4-2 Commando Royal Marines for my first tour. I'm not going to go into the first tour. I'm just going to say being shot at is unbelievable. And the sound of your own breathing as you run with the weight on your back while somebody's telling you to move over there, to shoot in that area, to kill that person, to have rounds landing here, to yell RPG as you literally watch a grenade fling past you, is unbelievable and an incredible experience. I decided that I wanted to save life too, though, something I picked up from that first tour. So when I got back, I went into medical training, rock and roll. I came close to the top of that class as well, and they said, where do you want to go? I said, who's going to Afghanistan next? They said, those guys. I said, okay, send me there. So on I go as a J Company medic onto Herrick 14. Now, great tour. I was patrolling every day. I was having a really good time. I was helping local people with local injuries. A couple of our guys got hurt, and I did my best to help them out. About 2 months in, and I remember we'd gone out to destroy the enemy because they'd been shooting at us for quite some time. I remember being led through a safe area by a local, and then suddenly he panicked and everything went wrong. And a friend of mine, a guy named Sam Alexander, he won a military cross, he stepped on something called a low metal content IED. Low metal content means copper wire was used, glass, wood, crunch, boom. Okay. The legacy part means they buried it there about 8 months ago, so they knew we were coming. And I don't mean that because they were spies, I just mean they knew we were obviously eventually going to get to them, so they buried that in there. And IED is an improvised explosive device. That explosion took all 4 of Sam's limbs off, and he bled to death in Afghanistan. It also took a phenomenal amount of damage to my boss's head. His name was Ali Augustine. He also died there in Afghanistan. The interpreter thought he was a wise ass and took his body armor out because it was too heavy and put cardboard in instead. And he took a phenomenal amount of shrapnel to his thoracic cavity, and he later died of sepsis in hospital. Terrible way to die. I was next in line. I have an amputation here. Nearly lost that one. I've got some nerve damage up here. I've got a chunk missing there. I had a double fracture to my pelvis, including an open book fracture, which is kind of dangerous because you can bleed to death in there, which is, it is what it is. I had a mild traumatic brain injury. I also had type 1 diabetes and semi-detached retina in my left eye. That's the end of chapter 2. How are we doing? You still with me? All right. So, but guys, there's a time limit here. Jesus. So, they don't tell you that when you get blown up, you wake up and you're a little bit volatile. You expect that you're still in Afghanistan. You're not. I was in a coma for 2 weeks. I woke up, thought I was captured, so I chinned one nurse and put another one in a headlock. Tried to fight my way out of the ICU, and when I realized I couldn't, I tried to then negotiate my way out of the ICU, which also didn't work. I was like, you sound like you've got a Birmingham accent, you're obviously from the UK, I can get you out, it's okay. And she's like, you're in Birmingham. So it was all a bit silly. It's a long process, the old recovery process, I'll be honest with you. You go, from the ICU up to the ward, and from the ward you go to a magical place called Headley Court. Is my fly up? Yes. So you go to Headley Court, and this is a place where everybody goes if you're injured. If you end up at Headley Court, things have gone wrong in your career. So while I'm there and I'm in a wheelchair, I've still got this X fix because they drilled into my pelvis to make sure that I couldn't move it and do more damage. So I was still there with a wean in a bag and stuff, and I had this metal cage sticking out of me. And this guy says to me, some person's doing like a theater thing. Why don't you go out and check that out? Sounds like it's right up your alley. I wasn't really a sportsman, right? So off I go. I wheel out. I meet some guy named Owen Shears and another guy named Stephen Rain. And they say they're a part of a company called Bravo 22 Company, and they're going to take soldier stories and put them on stage, and they're going to let the soldiers act it for a small, intimate audience. I said, look, I used to do some stuff on stage. I'll be a part of your crew. Sounds good. 2 weeks later, they said, you're in. 2 weeks after that, they said, you got the lead. I was like, oh. A month after that, they said, you know how we said it was community theater? We're going to put it on the West End. Okay. A month after that, I was in a room with soldiers and actors, and we were trying to come up with a storyline. A month after that, I had a script. 3 weeks after that, I was in front of 1,000 people acting out my own story. It went well. We ended up doing 125 shows. Won some awards. Pretty gnarly, really. At the end of that show, I kind of thought to myself, where do I want to go? Truth is, I kind of want Jonathan Ross's job. If I were Jonathan Ross, I'd be nervous about it, to be perfectly honest with you. I want to talk to celebrities, that kind of thing. Who's going to hire me? So I went out and I found British Forces Broadcasting Service and Forces Television, and I said to them, I'm not a bad-looking guy. I got a unique accent. I'm missing a leg from Afghanistan, Royal Marine Commando vet, and I don't come to pieces in front of people. Why don't you give me a job? They said, okay. A year after that, I had my own TV show where I was interviewing people like Keanu Reeves and Tom Cruise and talking about the movies they make. Now, somewhere along this process, right, somebody said that if it weren't for my morale, my ability to keep spirits high throughout all this, that they wouldn't have survived rehabilitation. BBC got wind of that, and then they stuck me into something called the People's Strictly, where I danced with Natalie Lowe in front of 10 million people and won. The one-legged guy goes back to dancing and wins it. Now, I've learned 5 things on this journey. Okay? You don't have to take them with you. I care. I'd like to say, oh, I don't care if you like it. I do genuinely care, but here it is. Pride. Make sure that whatever you're doing, you're going to be able to look back on yourself and say, well, I'm kind of proud of what I did there. Determination. Do not be deterred from what your goal is, which ties really happily into the next one, which is aggression. And I'm not talking fisticuffs, Wing Chun aggression. I'm talking, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. If you're going to do something, do it to the best and the strongest that you possibly can. Resilience. You cannot succeed without failure. You have to learn to walk again at some point in time, or at least I use that as an analogy. You're going to be down. Let it brush off and get back up and keep going. And the last one is, and I've taken this straight from the Royal Marines Code of Ethos, cheerfulness in the face of adversity. Because I'm going to be real honest with you now. If you ain't laughing, man, you're just not doing it right. Have a great evening.